They told me my land was perfect for a shortcut. And yeah, I guess it was flat, open, sitting right between two busy roads like it was just waiting to be used. But here's the thing nobody seemed to care about. It was mine. I didn't even realize it had turned into a public road until one evening, just before sunset, that quiet hour where everything slows down and the light hits just right. I was sitting on my porch with a drink, not thinking about much, when I saw headlights cutting across my field. Not on the road, not near the driveway, just slicing straight through the grass like it belonged there. At first I thought, okay, maybe someone got lost, happens all the time. But then another car followed, then another, then a third. No hesitation, no slowing down, just full confidence like they'd done it 100 times before. That's when something in my gut tightened. I stood up, walked closer to the edge of the porch, watching as the last car disappeared out the back toward the gravel street behind my property. And when I stepped down into the field, I saw it. Tire tracks, fresh and deep, carving a straight line from one road to the other. A shortcut. Now I own about 5 acres. Not huge, not tiny. Just enough land to give you space and peace, which is exactly why I bought it years ago, back when this area was quiet, before anyone cared about cutting 5 minutes off their commute. But things change. One road turned into a feeder for a brand new office complex, glass buildings, corporate parking lots, the whole deal. And the other side? That became a fast-growing neighborhood, families, school traffic, ride shares, all the chaos that comes with it. And somewhere along the line, someone connected the dots. The next morning I decided to see how bad it really was. So I sat out there with coffee and counted. 1 hour, just 1 hour. 27 cars crossed my land. 27. Nobody waved. Nobody slowed down. Nobody even looked like they were doing something wrong. That's the part that stuck with me. It wasn't just that they were using my land, it was how normal it felt to them. So I drove over to the office complex, figured maybe someone knew something. Maybe there was some misunderstanding, and I found a security guard standing by the gate. Older guy, looked like he'd seen it all, and I asked him straight up, "Hey, you know anything about people cutting through my property?" He didn't even blink, just shrugged and said, "Yeah, everyone uses that way. Everyone. Except me, apparently." So I went home, dug out my property survey, spread it across the kitchen table, and checked every line, every boundary. And there it was, exactly how I remembered it. No easements, no shared access, no public right-of-way, nothing. Legally, it was as clear as it gets. But I didn't block it off right away. And yeah, I know how that sounds. Like I should have thrown up a fence the second I saw those tracks. But something told me to wait, to watch, to really understand what I was dealing with. And what I saw over the next few days, it escalated. Delivery vans started using it, big ones too, bouncing across the field like it was a service road. Then rideshare drivers. You could tell by the way they moved, quick, efficient, cutting corners like their ratings depended on it. And then one morning, a school bus. I'm not kidding. It pulled halfway in before the driver realized something was off, probably saw the uneven ground, and then just slowly backed out, like a giant yellow apology. That's when it stopped being funny. The grass started disappearing fast, replaced by dust, loose dirt, a permanent path forming right in front of me. And then, like it always does, the trash showed up. A cup, a wrapper, a cigarette butt. That was it. That was the moment it crossed a line, not just physically, but mentally. Because now it wasn't just trespassing, it was entitlement. So I decided I was done. But here's the thing. I didn't want to be the guy who just throws up a fence overnight and turns this into some ugly standoff. I didn't want complaints, arguments, or some drawn-out neighborhood drama. I wanted something smarter, something that made a point without me having to say a word. So I made a few calls. First, a landscaper, someone who understood the land, how water moved, how terrain could be shaped. Then a soil engineer, because if I was going to do this, it had to be solid, defensible, and finally, I even checked with the county, just to make sure I wasn't stepping into anything that could come back on me. Everything checked out. What I built wasn't dramatic. No big barriers, no gates, nothing that screamed stay out. Just a shallow drainage ditch, wide enough to be obvious, shaped to handle runoff during heavy rain. Completely legal, completely justified, and placed exactly, and I mean exactly, along the path those cars had carved into my land. Not deep enough to be dangerous, but just deep enough that no car could cross it without risking damage. I marked it clearly too, reflective posts, warning signs, clean edges, no surprises, no tricks. And then I waited. The next evening, right around the same time as before, the first car came through, same confidence, same speed, and then brake lights. A hard stop. The driver just sat there for a second, probably trying to figure out what changed, then slowly backed up, turned around, and left the way they came. And just like that, everything shifted. By the end of that day, drivers were confused. By the end of the week, they were angry. And that's when the Real story started. Now let me pause the story for a second, because what's happening here, it's not just about a piece of land. It's about how people slowly convince themselves that something wrong is actually okay. And yeah, I've seen this play out more times than I can count. According to standard procedure, land doesn't just become public because enough people decide to use it. That's not how property law works. There's a concept called prescriptive easement, but it takes years, very specific conditions, and most importantly, the owner not pushing back. The moment you challenge it, that clock resets. From a legal perspective, what those drivers were doing was straight-up trespassing, even if they didn't feel like it. And that's the tricky part, feeling. Because once behavior becomes routine, people stop questioning it. This is a psychological trap. It's called normalization through repetition. The more people see others doing something, the less wrong it seems, until eventually, nobody even thinks twice. No guilt, no hesitation, just habit. And here's where it gets dangerous. Because if I had ignored it, if I had let that path exist long enough, there's a real chance I could have lost control over that part of my own land. So yeah, this wasn't just about stopping traffic. It was about drawing a line before someone else decided where that line should be. So yeah, people got angry. And not the quiet kind either. I'm talking full-blown, keyboard warrior, neighborhood group meltdown. Posts popping up overnight. Who blocked the connector road? This is ridiculous. We've been using that path for months. Months, like that somehow turned it into theirs. At first, it was just noise online, but then it spilled into real life. Cars started slowing down near my property, drivers rolling down their windows, staring like I'd personally ruined their morning. One guy actually stopped in the middle of the road, leaned out, and yelled, "You serious with this?" I just stood there, hands in my pockets, and said, "Yeah, I am." He shook his head like I'd betrayed some kind of unspoken agreement, like I owed him convenience. Then he sped off, tires kicking up dust, probably late for something he planned poorly in the first place. By day 3, the traffic on both roads started backing up. You could feel it, the tension, the frustration, people realizing they couldn't just cut through anymore. GPS apps hadn't caught up yet, so drivers kept getting routed toward my land, only to hit the ditch and turn around, creating this awkward little loop of regret. And that's when the city called. Now, I expected that, but the tone? That caught me off guard. It wasn't, "Hey, we understand your situation." It was more like, "Why did you block access?" I actually laughed a little, couldn't help it. "Access to what?" I asked. There was a pause on the other end. Then the guy goes, "Well, there's been an informal route connecting the office park to the residential area." Informal? I said, "Okay, and who authorized that?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Well, it developed naturally." And that right there, that was the moment I knew exactly what game we were playing. I leaned back in my chair and said, "Yeah, so did the ditch." Silence. He cleared his throat, tried to pivot, asked if I'd consider restoring access for the sake of traffic flow. And I said, real calm, "Sure, if the city wants to purchase that portion of my land." Dead silence again. Because suddenly, it wasn't informal anymore. Now it had a price tag. A couple days later, I get a knock on my door. Not a random driver this time. This was someone who meant business. Mid-40s, clean-cut, button-down shirt. The kind of guy who introduces himself before he even steps fully onto your porch. "Hi, I'm Daniel Brooks. I manage the office complex down the road." Of course he did. I nodded, leaned against the doorframe. Figured someone would show up eventually. He smiled, polite, controlled, but you could see the pressure behind it. "Look, I'll be direct. That shortcut your property provides, it's been helping our employees significantly. Cutting commute times, reducing congestion." I cut him off. "Yeah, trespassing usually does save time." That smile tightened just a little. He shifted his weight, tried again. "I understand your concern, but the route is already established. And I said, so are my property lines. That landed. You could see it in his eyes, that little flicker where the conversation stopped being theoretical and got real. So he switched tactics. We'd be willing to improve the path, gravel it, make it safer, cleaner. No. Maintain it regularly, ensure no debris. No. We can compensate you. Now, that's where I paused. Not because I was sold, but because now we were finally having the right conversation. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and said, all right, let's talk about what that would actually look like. We stood there for a while, going back and forth, and I laid it out clearly. If there was going to be any access at all, it wasn't going to be this free-for-all situation anymore. I said, daytime only. No commercial vehicles. Liability on your side, not mine. And if anything gets damaged, land, drainage, anything, access is gone immediately. He listened, nodding slowly, but I could tell. He didn't like it. That kind of defeats the purpose, he said. And I shrugged. Then maybe it wasn't worth it to begin with. That ended the conversation. For the moment. Because for the next 2 weeks, things got messy. Traffic got worse before it got better. People had to reroute, adjust schedules, leave earlier. All the things they'd been avoiding by cutting through my land. And let me tell you, people hate adjusting. The complaints got louder, not quieter. Emails to the office park, calls to the city, posts online getting more aggressive, some even suggesting I was hurting the community. Hurting the community by not letting strangers drive across my property. Yeah, but here's the interesting part. Slowly, almost quietly, people started adapting. GPS rerouted. Drivers learned new paths. The chaos settled. And right when things were starting to stabilize, Daniel came back. This time, he didn't come alone. He brought paperwork. Thick folder, neatly organized, the kind of thing that says, we're done negotiating casually. We sat down at my kitchen table, same table where I'd looked over my property survey, and he slid the documents toward me. We'd like to formalize an easement, he said. Now that word, easement, that changes everything. Because this wasn't just about convenience anymore. This was about rights. Permanent ones. I didn't say anything right away. Just opened the folder, started reading. Line by line. Clause by clause. And let me tell you, it was written exactly how you'd expect. Broad access, minimal restrictions, long-term use. Great for them. Not so great for me. So I grabbed a pen, and I started making changes. Not small ones either. I kept the ditch. That was non-negotiable. Then I specified a single controlled crossing point. Not a wide path. Not multiple entries. One location, clearly defined. I added removable barriers. Clear signage requirements. Time restrictions. Vehicle restrictions. And then I added one clause, the most important one. If any rule was violated, access would be revoked immediately. No warnings. No second chances. I slid the papers back to him. He read through it, slower than before, his expression tightening with every page. That's restrictive, he said. Yeah, I replied. It's supposed to be. He leaned back, thinking, weighing options, because now he had a real decision to make. Push back, walk away, or accept terms that clearly weren't in his favor. And here's the thing. He knew the pressure wasn't on me. It was on him. Because outside my front door, commuters were still complaining. Employees were still frustrated. And that informal route they'd all gotten used to, it was gone. For 3 days, I didn't hear anything. No calls. No emails. Nothing. Then on the 4th day, he came back. Same folder. Same papers. Signed. No speech. No negotiation. Just a quiet. We agree to your terms. And just like that, it was done. The crossing was built exactly where I approved it. Clean, controlled, unmistakable. No more guessing. No more freeloading shortcuts. No more pretending it was public. And the ditch? It stayed right where it was. A reminder that just because something becomes convenient doesn't mean it becomes yours. So yeah, that's how a piece of land turned into a battleground over something as simple as a few minutes of driving time. And if you're thinking this was really just about a ditch, or a shortcut, or even traffic, it wasn't. Not even close. The lesson here is, people don't usually start by doing something blatantly wrong. They ease into it, step by step, little justifications stacking on top of each other until the line disappears completely. And once that line is gone, good luck convincing anyone it was ever there. Because from their perspective, they weren't trespassing. They were just taking a faster way home. And that's where it gets interesting, because this kind of situation shows up everywhere, not just with land, not just with roads. It shows up in neighborhoods, in HOAs, in shared spaces, even in workplaces. Someone bends a rule, nobody says anything, someone else follows, and before you know it, the exception becomes the expectation. This is a psychological trap. Normalization doesn't feel like a decision, it feels like momentum. You don't notice it happening until you're the one standing there wondering how things got so far off track. And if you're on the other side of it, the person whose boundaries are being pushed, it can feel weirdly isolating, like you're the problem for saying no, like you're the one disrupting the flow, even when that flow is built on something that was never yours to give. I had people look at me like I was selfish, like I was holding something back from the community. But here's the part nobody likes to say out loud. Convenience isn't a right. According to standard procedure, property rights are actually pretty simple at their core. You own something, you control how it's used, and unless you legally give that up, nobody else gets to decide for you. Not your neighbors, not a company down the road, not even a group of frustrated commuters who all agree it would be easier if you just didn't mind. From a legal perspective, what I did wasn't aggressive, it was preventative. Because once access goes unchallenged long enough, things get messy, claims get made, expectations get built, and suddenly, you're not just dealing with people driving across your land. You're dealing with the idea that they're entitled to it, and unwinding that. Way harder than stopping it early. But here's where it goes deeper than just law. It's about how people respond to boundaries. When I first blocked that path, people didn't ask questions, they reacted. Frustration, anger, blame, all of it directed outward, because it's easier to be mad at someone else than to adjust your own habits. That's human nature. We optimize for comfort. We defend what benefits us. And when that benefit gets taken away, even if it was never ours to begin with, it feels like a loss. And people don't like losing. But over time, something shifts. They adapt. They find new routes. They stop thinking about the thing they lost and start focusing on what works now. And that's the part most people underestimate. How quickly essential things become optional once they're gone. That shortcut? It felt critical until it wasn't available anymore. Then it became just another path that used to exist. And that's why I didn't rush into a fight, didn't escalate it into something personal. I let reality do some of the work. I let people experience the inconvenience, sit with it, adjust to it. Because once they did, the negotiation wasn't about desperation anymore. It was about practicality. And that gave me leverage. Now, could I have just said no to everything? Absolutely. Shut it down completely, never allow access. End of story. But that's not always the smartest move either. Because sometimes, control isn't about blocking everything. Sometimes it's about defining the terms. What I ended up with wasn't just a solution, it was structure. Clear rules. Clear consequences. No ambiguity. And more importantly, no assumptions. Nobody could just decide to use my land anymore. If they wanted access, it had to be on record, on paper, agreed to, not implied, not assumed, not slowly taken over time. And that's really the takeaway here, not just for land, but for anything you own, anything you control, anything that matters to you. If you don't define your boundaries, someone else will. Not out of malice most of the time, but out of convenience. And convenience is a powerful thing. It spreads fast. It justifies itself. It turns just this once into this is how it's always been. So the question isn't just, was I right to block the shortcut? The better question is, at what point does something stop being shared and start being taken? And how long would you wait before doing something about it? Because I can tell you this. By the time it feels obvious, it's already been happening for a while.